Hey there. Let's jump right into a super fun story. Imagine a quiet little neighborhood. You know, the kind where houses sit close together, kids play in the yards, and people wave at each other like they're all friends. Or at least, they think they are. That's where I live. My name's Jake, and I've got a dog named Max. Max isn't just any dog, he's big, fluffy, and super special. He's a canine dog, which means he's trained to sniff out trouble, like bad guys or sneaky stuff. But to me, he's my best buddy in the whole world. Every day, when the sun is high in the sky, Max likes to nap on our front porch. He flops down on the wooden floor, stretches out his big paws, and soaks up the warm sunshine like it's his job. His fluffy fur shines, and he looks so peaceful, just snoozing away. I sit nearby sometimes, sipping lemonade, watching him dream. It's calm. It's nice. It feels like nothing could go wrong. But guess what? Something was about to happen. Something big. Before I tell you more, I've got a quick question for you. Have you ever had a nosy neighbor? You know, someone who's always peeking out their window, watching what you're doing, or complaining about silly things. I bet you have. Tell me about it in the comments below. Oh, and while you're at it, let me know where you're watching this story from today. Are you at home? At school? Somewhere else? And if you like wild, crazy stories like this one, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next one. Okay, back to the story. Here's the thing nobody in my neighborhood knew, Max isn't just a regular dog. He's got secrets. And me? I'm not just some guy who lives here with a pet. I've got secrets too. But I'm not going to spill them all right now. That would ruin the fun. For now, just picture me and Max, living our quiet little life, while something sneaky was bubbling up around us. Trouble was coming, and it was about to knock right on my front door. Let's set the scene a little more. My house is small but cozy. It's got a red door, a tiny garden with flowers, and that porch where Max loves to sleep. The neighborhood is full of people who seem nice enough. There's Mr. Thompson across the street, who's always mowing his lawn. There's Mrs. Lee next door, who bakes cookies sometimes and waves at me when I walk by. And then there's Karen. Oh boy, Karen. She's the one who's about to stir up all the trouble. Karen lives 2 houses down. She's the boss of our neighborhood group, called the HOA. That's a fancy way of saying she makes rules for everyone and loves telling people what to do. She's got short hair, a loud voice, and a habit of glaring at anything she doesn't like. And guess what? She doesn't like Max. Not one bit. Every time she walks by and sees him napping on the porch, her face scrunches up like she just ate a sour lemon. That dog's too big, she'd say. He doesn't belong here. I'd just smile and shrug. He's harmless, I'd tell her. He's just sleeping. But Karen didn't care. She'd huff and puff and stomp away, muttering about rules and safety. I didn't think much of it at first. Max and I were happy. The sun kept shining, the birds kept singing, and life felt good. But deep down, I knew Karen wasn't going to let it go. She was like a storm cloud waiting to burst. Now, here's where it gets interesting. See, Max and I weren't just hanging out in this neighborhood for no reason. We had a job, a secret job. Nobody knew about it, not even nosy Karen. Max's big, sleepy eyes and floppy ears. They were hiding something awesome. And me, standing there in my old jeans and t-shirt, looking like just another guy. I was hiding something too. What was it? Well, I'll give you a tiny hint, it had to do with keeping people safe. But don't worry, I won't tell you everything yet. That's coming later, and it's going to be a big surprise. So, there we were, me and Max, living our quiet days. The neighborhood buzzed along like always. Kids rode their bikes. Cars drove by. The mailman dropped off letters. Everything seemed normal. But normal doesn't last forever, does it? Nope. Trouble was sneaking closer, step by step. And it all started with Karen. She was about to do something so wild, so over the top, that it would flip everything upside down. Imagine this, one sunny afternoon, Max is napping like usual. His big chest moves up and down as he breathes, totally relaxed. I'm inside, grabbing a snack, when I hear a loud voice outside. It's Karen. She's standing on the sidewalk, staring at Max, her hands on her hips. She's mad, really mad. And then I see it, her phone. She's holding it up, ready to call someone. Who? Why? What's she up to? I didn't know it yet, but that phone call was about to change everything. That's where our story begins. A quiet day, a sleeping dog, and a nosy neighbor with a plan. It sounds simple, right? But trust me, it's not. Things are about to get crazy. Secrets are going to come out. And by the end, you'll be cheering for Max and me and maybe laughing at Karen too. So stick around, because this is just the start. Trouble's knocking, and we're about to answer the door. Okay, let's keep this story rolling. Things are about to heat up, and it all starts with Karen. You've probably met someone like her before. She's the kind of person who's always sticking her nose where it doesn't belong. She peeks over fences, watches everyone like a hawk, and loves yelling about rules that nobody else even cares about. In our neighborhood, Karen is the boss of the HOA. That's a group that makes rules for all the houses, like what color your mailbox can be or how tall your grass can grow. And let me tell you, Karen takes her job way too seriously. Karen's got a problem with everything. If a kid leaves a toy in the yard, she's mad. If someone parks their car a little crooked, she's mad. But her biggest problem? My dog, Max. Max is big and fluffy, and he's my best friend. He's a canine dog, which means he's super smart and trained to help catch bad guys. But to Karen, he's just trouble. Every time she sees him napping on my porch, she flips out. That dog's too big, she'd shout, her voice loud enough to wake up the whole street. He's a danger to the neighborhood. Now, that's just silly. Max wouldn't hurt a fly unless I told him to. He's the sweetest dog ever. When he's not napping, he's wagging his tail or chasing a ball I throw for him. But Karen doesn't see that. All she sees is his big size and his fluffy fur, and she acts like he's some kind of monster. I'd try to tell her, he's harmless, Karen. He's just a good boy. But she'd just huff and stomp away, her arms crossed tight. This went on for weeks. Every day, Max would nap on the porch, and Karen would walk by and glare at him. Sometimes she'd mutter stuff under her breath, like, I'm going to do something about that dog. I didn't think she'd really do anything crazy. I mean, who gets that mad about a sleeping dog? But I was wrong. Karen was cooking up a plan, and it was about to make everything wild. One day, the sun was shining bright, and Max was snoozing like always. His big paws were stretched out, and his snores were soft and steady. I was inside, grabbing a cup of coffee, when I heard footsteps outside. Fast, loud footsteps. I peeked out the window, and there she was, Karen. She stormed up to my porch like she owned the place. Her face was red, her eyes were narrow, and she had her phone in her hand, clutched tight like a weapon. I've had enough, she yelled. Her voice was so loud, it bounced off the houses. I'm calling 911. She waved her phone in the air, pointing at Max like he'd done something awful. That beast shouldn't be out here scaring people. I couldn't believe it. Calling 911? Over a napping dog? I stepped outside and leaned against the door frame, my coffee still warm in my hands. I didn't say anything at first. I just watched her, sipping my drink, trying not to laugh. Karen was making a total fool of herself, and she didn't even know it. Max didn't even wake up. His eyes stayed closed, his snores kept going, like he didn't care one bit about her big tantrum. Karen, I said, keeping my voice calm, he's just sleeping. He's not scaring anyone. But she didn't listen. She shook her head so hard her hair bounced. No, she screeched. He's a danger. I'm telling the police. They'll take him away. She started tapping her phone, her fingers moving fast, like she couldn't wait to tattle on us. I could have gotten mad. I could have yelled back. But I didn't. Why? Because I knew something Karen didn't. Something big. Something that was going to flip her little freak out upside down and make her wish she'd never picked up that phone. What was it? Oh, I'm not telling you just yet. That's the fun part, you've got to keep reading to find out. But let's just say this, while Karen was screaming and dialing, I wasn't worried at all. I stood there, cool as a cucumber, watching her rant. Max kept snoring, his big belly rising and falling. The neighborhood was quiet, except for her. Birds chirped in the trees. A kid rode by on a bike down the street. Everything seemed normal except for Karen, losing her mind over a dog who was too sleepy to care. She thought she was in charge. She thought she'd win. She thought calling 911 would fix everything and get Max in trouble. But here's the thing about Karen, she didn't know the whole story. She didn't know who Max really was. And she definitely didn't know who I really was. That's the secret bubbling under all this drama, and it was about to burst out in a way she'd never expect. See, Karen was loud and bossy, but she wasn't smart about this. She judged Max by his looks, big, furry, strong, and decided he was bad news. She judged me too, thinking I was just some guy who didn't care about her rules. But looks can trick you. Max and I had a hidden side, a side she'd never guess in a million years. And when that side came out, her big plan was going to flop hard. So there she stood, yelling into her phone. Yes, hello, 911? There's a dangerous dog on a porch. You need to send someone right now. Her voice was sharp, like she was the queen of the world. I took another sip of my coffee, letting her talk. I didn't stop her. I didn't need to. Because what was coming next? Oh, it was going to be good. Really good. The tension was building, like a storm getting ready to break. Karen thought she was the thunder, loud and scary. But me and Max? We were the lightning, quiet for now, but ready to strike when the time was right. She had no idea what she'd just started. Trouble wasn't just knocking anymore, it was kicking down the door. And soon, everyone would see what Max and I were really about. Stick around, because this is where it gets juicy. What do you think Karen's going to do when she finds out the truth? Can you guess what's coming? Let me know. Alright, let's keep this story going. Things are getting exciting now, and we're about to see some sneaky little hints that make everything even more fun. Karen wasn't new to causing trouble. Nope, she'd been at it for a while. She didn't just wake up one day and decide to hate Max. She'd been complaining about him for weeks, maybe even months. She'd called animal control before, telling them my big, fluffy dog was a problem. She'd left nasty notes taped to my mailbox, scribbled with angry words like, "Get rid of that dog," or "He's too big for this neighborhood." Every time she did something like that, I'd just smile and wave at her. I'd say, "Hey, Karen, Max is a good boy," and keep my cool. I never got mad. I never yelled back. Why? Because I had a secret. A big one. See, Max and I weren't just hanging out in this neighborhood for fun. We weren't just napping on the porch and sipping lemonade all day. Nope. We were waiting. Watching. Something important was going on, and Karen had no clue. That day, the one where Karen stormed up to my porch with her phone, was different. She was madder than ever. Her face was red, her voice was loud, and she was ready to call 911. "I'm done with that beast," she shouted, holding her phone up like it was a prize. She thought she was going to win this time. She thought the police would come and take Max away, and she'd be the big hero of the neighborhood. Oh, how wrong she was. While Karen was yelling and dialing, I stood there, calm as could be. My coffee was still in my hand, and I took a little sip. Max was still napping, snoring softly on the porch. But then, I noticed something. Something Karen didn't see. Across the street, just out of her sight, there was a black SUV. You know, one of those big cars with dark windows that looks kind of mysterious. It was parked there, quiet and still, like it didn't want anyone to notice it. Inside that SUV, I could see two guys. They were wearing dark sunglasses, the cool kind you see in movies. They weren't just sitting there, either. They were talking into little radios, whispering stuff I couldn't hear. Karen was too busy screaming to look around, but I saw them. And guess what? Max saw them too. Well, he didn't see them with his eyes, because he was still napping. But his ears twitched just a little, like he knew something was up. Max is smart like that. Even when he's sleeping, he's paying attention. I leaned down a tiny bit and whispered to him, "Get ready." My voice was so quiet, nobody could hear it but Max. His ears twitched again, but he didn't move. He stayed still, pretending to sleep. That's my boy, he knows how to play it cool. Meanwhile, Karen kept going. "Hello, 911, she said into her phone. "There's a dangerous dog here. You need to send someone fast." She sounded so proud, like she was solving a big problem. But here's the thing, she wasn't winning. Not even close. She thought she was about to get me and Max in big trouble, but she was about to lose big time. Why? Because those guys in the SUV weren't just random people. They were part of my secret. And Max? He wasn't just a fluffy pet. We were both waiting for something, and Karen's little phone call was about to mess everything up in a way she'd never expect. Let's back up a bit. Karen had been picking on us for a long time. One day, she'd called animal control, and a guy in a truck showed up. He looked at Max, who was wagging his tail and licking his hand, and said, "This dog's fine. He's not hurting anyone." Karen was so mad she stomped her foot and yelled, "He's too big." The animal control guy just shrugged and left. Another time, she taped a note to my mailbox that said, "Move that dog or else." I laughed when I read it and showed it to Max. He barked like he thought it was funny too. Each time she tried something, I stayed calm. I didn't fight with her. I didn't argue. I just smiled and waved, because I knew the truth. Max and I had a job, a secret job. We were watching the neighborhood, keeping an eye out for something big. What was it? Well, I'll give you a tiny hint, it had to do with catching bad guys. But that's all I'm saying for now. The real surprise is still coming. Back to that day with the phone call. Karen was pacing back and forth in front of my porch, talking to 911. "Yes, it's an emergency," she said. "This dog is a danger to everyone." I almost laughed out loud. Max? A danger? The only thing he was dangerous to was a bowl of dog treats. But I didn't say anything. I just watched her, and I watched that black SUV too. Those guys in the SUV were quiet, but I knew they were listening. Their radios crackled a little, and one of them nodded, like he was getting a message. They weren't here by accident. They were part of my plan, my secret plan. And Max? His little ear twitch told me he was ready too. We'd been waiting for weeks, keeping everything hush-hush, and now Karen was about to stumble right into it. She didn't know it, but every shout she made, every step she took, was bringing her closer to a big shock. She thought she was the boss, calling the shots. But me and Max? We were the ones really in control. We were watching, waiting, and now things were starting to move. The air felt thick, like something huge was about to happen. And it was. Karen hung up the phone and smirked at me. "The police are coming," she said, crossing her arms. "You're done." I just nodded, still sipping my coffee. "Okay, Karen," I said, nice and slow. She thought she'd won. She thought this was her big moment. But those guys in the SUV? They were the first clue. And Max's ear twitch? That was the second. Something awesome was about to go down, and Karen had no idea. Here we go, this is the best part of the story. Everything's about to explode into a huge surprise. Let's jump in. The second Karen hung up her phone, she had this big, sneaky smirk on her face. You know, like when someone thinks they've just won a giant prize, like the lottery. She crossed her arms tight, staring at me with her chin up high. She was so sure she'd gotten me in trouble. Sirens started wailing far away, getting louder and louder. Karen's eyes sparkled with glee. She was ready to watch me squirm, to see me panic and beg. But guess what? I wasn't worried. Not even a tiny bit. I just stood there, leaning on my porch, sipping my coffee like it was any old day. Then it happened. 2 cop cars zoomed up the street, their red and blue lights flashing bright. They screeched to a stop right in front of my house. The doors popped open, and 2 officers stepped out. Karen couldn't wait. She pointed at Max, who was still napping on the porch, and shouted, "That's the dog. He's a menace. Get him." Her voice was loud and bossy, like she was in charge of the whole world. She thought the police were here to grab Max and drag him away. Oh, how wrong she was. The officers didn't even look at Max. Not once. His big, fluffy body stayed snoozing, his snore soft and steady. Instead, the cops turned and walked straight toward me. Their boots clomped on the ground, and their faces were serious but calm. Karen's smirk started to slip. Her eyes got wide, and she blinked fast, like she wasn't sure what was happening. One of the officers stopped right in front of me. He was tall, with a shiny badge on his chest. He nodded at me and said, "Officer Jake. Good to see you again." His voice was friendly, like we were old buddies. Karen's jaw dropped so low it almost hit the ground. Her arms fell to her sides, and she stared at us, totally confused. She didn't say a word she couldn't. Here's the secret she never saw coming: I'm not just some random guy with a dog. My name's Jake, and I'm an undercover cop. That means I work for the police, but I keep it hidden. I don't wear a uniform or drive a cop car every day. I blend in, pretending to be normal, so I can catch bad guys without them knowing. And Max? He's not just a fluffy pet who naps all the time. He's my canine partner. That's a special dog trained to help police. Max can sniff out trouble, chase crooks, and take them down if I tell him to. He's not napping all day because he's lazy, he's resting up for the big jobs. Karen had no idea. All this time, she'd been yelling about Max being too big and a danger, but she didn't know he was a hero. She thought I was just some guy who didn't care about her silly rules. She judged us by how we looked, me in my old jeans and Max with his fluffy fur, and she got it all wrong. Now, standing there with the cops talking to me, she was starting to see the truth. And it wasn't what she expected. But wait, there's an even bigger twist. Remember that black SUV parked across the street? The one with the two guys in sunglasses? They weren't just random people hanging out. They were my backup. That means they were extra cops helping me with my secret job. For weeks, we'd been staking out the neighborhood. Staking out is when you watch a place super quietly, waiting for something to happen. We were tracking a crook, a bad guy who was hiding nearby. Maybe he was stealing stuff or planning something sneaky. We didn't tell anyone, not even the neighbors, because we had to keep it a secret to catch him. Max and I were part of the plan. Every day, while he napped on the porch, he was really listening with those twitchy ears of his. I'd sit there, looking chill, but I was watching too. The guys in the SUV were ready to jump in if we needed them. We were so close to nabbing that crook until Karen messed it all up. Her little 911 call? It blew our cover wide open. Blew our cover means she ruined our secret. Now everyone knew we were cops, and the bad guy might run away. The officer talking to me shook his head a little, like he couldn't believe this mess. "Jake," he said, "looks like we've got a problem now." I nodded back. "Yeah," I said, "thanks to her." I tilted my head toward Karen, who was still standing there, frozen. Her face went from red to white, like all the color drained out. She opened her mouth to say something, but nothing came out. She looked like a fish gasping for air. The other officer turned toward her. "Ma'am," he said, his voice firm, "why'd you call us about this dog?" Karen blinked fast. He's dangerous," she stammered. "He's too big. He shouldn't be here." The officer raised an eyebrow. "That dog," he said, pointing at Max. Max picked that exact moment to yawn, showing off his big teeth, then flopped his head back down to sleep. The officer chuckled. "Doesn't look dangerous to me." Karen's hands started shaking. But I didn't know," she said. "I thought he was just a pet." The first officer crossed his arms. "Well, now you do," he said. "This is Officer Jake, and that's his canine partner. They're working. And you just made their job a lot harder." Across the street, the SUV doors opened. The two guys in sunglasses stepped out, their radios still in their hands. They walked over, looking serious. "Jake," one of them said, "the suspect's on the move." He heard the sirens. My stomach dropped. That crook we'd been tracking? He was slipping away because of Karen's call. I looked at her and said, "Nice job, Karen. You just helped a bad guy." Her eyes got huge. "What?" she squeaked. "I didn't mean to." But it was too late. The truth was out. I wasn't just a neighbor. Max wasn't just a dog. We were a team, and Karen's big tantrum had turned everything upside down. The cops, the SUV guys, Max and me, we were all part of something big, and now the neighborhood knew it. Okay, here we are, the part where everything gets wrapped up. Let's see how this crazy story ends. The cops turned to Karen, and their faces were super serious. They didn't look happy at all. One of them, the tall guy with the shiny badge, stepped closer to her. "Ma'am," he said, his voice deep and stern, "you just messed up something big. You interfered with an active investigation. That's a crime." Karen's eyes got huge, like big round saucers. Her mouth opened, and she started to stammer, But, the dog. It's all about the dog." She pointed at Max, still trying to blame him. I couldn't help but smile. I bent down and scratched Max behind his ears. He finally woke up, blinking his sleepy eyes and wagging his tail a little. "Max is a hero," I told her, my voice nice and calm. "He's caught more bad guys than you've written HOA fines." That was true. Karen loved writing those silly fine stuff like "your grass is too long," or "your mailbox is the wrong color." But Max? He'd helped me stop real criminals, the kind who steal and hurt people. He was way more important than her rules. Karen shook her head fast. "No, no, no," she said. "This isn't right." But the cops didn't care. They pulled out a pair of shiny handcuffs. "You wasted our time," the second officer said, "and you messed up our sting." A sting is a secret plan to catch a bad guy, and Karen's 911 call had ruined ours. They weren't handcuffing her because of Max, they were doing it because she'd caused a big problem for the police. The tall officer grabbed her arm gently but firmly, and the cuffs clicked around her wrists. Karen's face went red again, and she started yelling as they led her to the cop car. "This isn't fair," she shouted. "I didn't know. I was just trying to help." Her voice got louder and louder, but the cops didn't stop. They opened the car door, helped her sit inside, and shut it with a bang. Through the window, I could see her still talking, waving her hands even with the cuffs on. But nobody was listening to her anymore. I stood there with Max, watching it all. He yawned and stretched, finally awake from his long nap. I gave him a pat on the head. "Good boy," I said. "He deserved it after everything." The neighbors started peeking out their windows, their curtains moving just a little. Some opened their doors a crack to see better. They were whispering to each other, their voices soft but curious. "Who's that guy?" I heard one say. "That's just Jake, right? The quiet guy with the dog." But now they knew the truth. I wasn't just quiet Jake. I was Officer Jake, an undercover cop keeping them safe. All this time, while they were mowing their lawns and walking their kids to school, Max and I had been watching out for them. We were after a bad guy hiding in the neighborhood, and nobody had a clue until Karen's big mistake let it all out. The cop cars started their engines, and the lights flashed again as they pulled away with Karen in the back. She was still yelling, but the sound faded as they drove off. The black SUV with my backup guys followed behind. They had to go chase that crook now, the one who got away because of the sirens. It wasn't perfect, but at least Karen wasn't causing trouble anymore. Max and I walked back to the porch. The sun was still shining, and the day felt calm again. I grabbed a big dog treat from inside a chewy one Max loves and tossed it to him. He caught it in his mouth and flopped down to munch on it, his tail wagging like crazy. "You earned that," I told him, sitting next to him. He looked up at me with his big, happy eyes, like he knew he'd done a good job, even if he'd slept through most of it. The neighbors kept watching us. Mr. Thompson, the guy who mows his lawn all the time, stepped outside and waved. "Hey, Jake," he called. "You're a cop? That's wild." I waved back. "Yep," I said. "Me and Max are a team." Mrs. Lee, the cookie lady next door, poked her head out too. "I always thought Max was special," she said, smiling. "Guess I was right." It felt good. For weeks, I'd been hiding who I was, pretending to be just another guy. Now everyone knew, and they weren't mad, they were amazed. Kids started running over, asking if they could pet Max. I said yes, and soon he was surrounded by little hands scratching his fur. He loved it, rolling onto his back for belly rubs. Karen was gone, and justice was served. She'd tried to get us in trouble, but it backfired big time. Instead of Max getting taken away, she was the one in the cop car. She'd learned her lesson: don't mess with a hero dog and his cop partner. And me and Max? We'd keep doing our job, keeping the neighborhood safe, one nap at a time. "All right, We're at the end of this wild story. So, there you have it. Karen, the nosy HOA lady, thought she could boss everyone around. She walked around like she owned the whole neighborhood, yelling about rules and pointing fingers. She thought she was so smart, calling 911 on Max, my big fluffy dog. But guess what? She didn't see the truth. That truth was right there, sleeping on my porch every day. Max wasn't just a dog, and I wasn't just a guy. We were a team, a secret cop team keeping everyone safe. Karen had no idea. Here's the cool part, sometimes, the people you think are weak or quiet are the ones with all the power. Karen looked at Max and me and decided we weren't important. She judged us fast, thinking Max was trouble and I was just lazy. But she was so wrong. Max is a hero who catches bad guys, and I'm a cop who helps him. We were strong all along, even when she couldn't see it. That's a big lesson. Don't underestimate people, because you might be surprised by what they can do. What do you think about that? Have you ever met a Karen who got what she deserved? Maybe someone who was mean or bossy, but then something happened, and they learned they weren't the boss after all. Tell me your stories down below, I'd love to hear them. It's fun to think about times when the little guy wins, right? Like me and Max did. Oh, and here's something to remember, next time you see a dog napping on a porch, don't be like Karen. Don't call 911 or freak out. That dog might be more than just a pet. Maybe he's a hero, like Max. And the person with him. They might be watching out for you, keeping things safe without you even knowing. You never know who's really watching, so maybe just wave and smile instead. It's a lot nicer that way. This whole adventure with Karen, Max, and me, it's a good reminder. People can surprise you. The ones who seem small or quiet might be the strongest of all. Karen thought she had the power, but in the end, she was the one in trouble, and we were the ones who came out on top. So, keep your eyes open and your heart big. Don't judge too fast, because the truth might be bigger than you think. And hey, if a dog like Max can be a hero, maybe you can be one too. Stay kind, stay curious, and keep watching for the next big surprise. See you in the next story.